Welcome to this podcast. My name is John O'Sullivan. I'm the president of the Danube Institute in Budapest. We are cooperating with the free market roadshow in order to bring to you a very interesting, I might almost say, unique ability for three business leaders here in Budapest to discuss the situation created by the coronavirus and the economic consequences of it with one of the economic ministers in the government. The minister in question is László György. He is the Secretary of State for Economic Strategy and Regulation at the Ministry for Information and Technology. Previously, he was chief economist at Zazaveg, and he's done a number of other he has a number of other tasks, but particularly, of course, he's recently published a new book with the title Creating Balance, the Mission of Economic Policy. So I'm going, first of all, to ask László if he would give us a brief introduction to the situation we're in, tell us how we think we're going to emerge from it, and ask what are the government expectations about this? How long do we think the crisis will last? What are the most important governmental responses and measures to it? And after he's answered those questions, I'll invite the three representatives of business to question him about those responses, and then we'll go on to discuss a number of other things. So, László, if I could just begin by asking you to make your opening remarks.
Thank you very much. First of all, what we are in now, it's a situation very close to war situation, but it has a very important difference to a war economic situation. And the difference is that in a war, you know who you are fighting against and you know where it ends or where it can end. Here, it's not exactly the same. The former vice governor of Australia, Mr. Grenville, I'm sorry, I forget his first name, maybe he's Stephen Grenville, made a comparison on the situation of this pandemic economics compared to war economics, because it is rather closer to war economics than to any other crisis situations in the past. And he said that there are a few key differences between war economics and pandemic economics, and one which I like the most is that in a war, reckless courage is maybe pays off, but in this case not. Rather, patient, how would you say, cautious patience, what he said, that pays off. So we have to be cautious and patient. And in this case, we created an economic protection action plan, which we are now realizing. And Professor Palkovic László is responsible for the realization of this economic protection action plan. And I'm in charge for the operative design of the plan and the operative realization of the plan. And we have three basic principles. One is balancedness or proportionateness. John, you mentioned my book, and it's about creating balance. And we believe that here in this case, if we are cautious and patient, we can go further on, and maybe we can get in a better situation than instead of being reckless and courageous, because we don't know how long it will last. And when we are helping and saving workplaces and helping Hungarian citizens, we are spending their money. So we are spending taxpayers' money in any case. So, and they will have to pay it back later on. This is their money. And that is why we have to be balanced and proportionate. And this is one basic principle of our economic protection action plan. And this was designed together with the representatives of the employees and the employers. It's very important that we are in a market economy, and solutions have to come from the representatives, the actors of the market economy. The state can only help them to provide solutions. This is also a very important principle, and they think that this balanced and proportionate action that we are taking are saving as many workplaces as possible. The second most important principle, what this Economic Protection Action Plan relies on, is that we started to build a society and an economy based on work and study, or work and knowledge, since 2010. And we stick to this even in crisis times, and we are happy that our citizens are supporting us in that. We asked the Hungarian people what they think about it, and 80% of them said they rather want to work than to receive subsidies. So either they want to work or study, and to get some scholarship for that studying, or give them vocational adult education credit on zero interest rate. That's what we are doing. Then receiving subsidy. Only 14% of the Hungarian population is supporting that. They would rather demand subsidy than work or studying. And the third very important principle is that we have to keep organized knowledge or ordered knowledge together here in Hungary. We had a bad experience, or relatively bad experience in the 1990s when we turned into the to market economy from planned economy. Of course, we believe that market economy is superior to command economy without any question. But then many of the organized knowledge in the economy was dispersed. We lost it. So we created a special work protection scheme for research, development, and innovation workplaces to keep the ordered knowledge together. And we also have some protection plans to protect the ownership in the Hungarian economy, because we see there some challenges that can cause trouble. And lastly, just not to take it too long, it belongs to proportionateness that there are 3 phases of the Economic Protection Action Plan, and we are currently in the 2nd phase. This is about protecting as many workplaces as possible and creating already new workplaces, or making the existing workplaces more efficient. For this reason, we have competitiveness investment programs. So workplace protection schemes are only one side of the coin, and the other side is fostering investments in order to make the Hungarian workplaces more effective. There is a program for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises for 50 billion Hungarian forints initial. It's an initial amount, and another 50 billion for the larger enterprises in another structure, because it's easier to deal with larger enterprises in a less structured way. And then if we were balanced and proportionate in protecting workplaces, we will have more money to our structural issues. Like we just started today, the application started for the free adult education programs in info communication, in ICT and programming and digitalization. It is an 8-week-long program. It is available for free for everyone above 18 years of age, above 18. And we truly believe that this crisis is an opportunity as well. So the time that is saved, or the time which doesn't have to be spent on working because there's less workload at the companies, or for those who lost their jobs, they can spend this time with making their workplace and their everyday life more efficient, knowing more about digitalization and using it in real life. And And there are, lastly, 5 areas of the Economic Protection Action Plan. The first is focusing on preserving the jobs. The second is creating jobs. The third is strengthening of priority sectors. The fourth is providing funding for businesses, because we believe that credit and capital and warranty funding is crucial in a market economy. If the companies are willing to lend, to borrow money, then that indicates a trust and the confidence in at least medium term, which is a very important indicator of the expectations of the economic actors and our future prospects. And the fifth, we are doing all this for the Hungarian families, and the protection of families and pensioners is most important to us. So that's in brief, and I'm very curious about all of our guests. András, Zsolt, Zoltán, Martin, what do they think about our Economic Protection Action Plan? How does it help their work, and what they would recommend? Because we are having a meeting every week with the representatives of the employees and the employers, and we accept their ideas and proposals, and we try to build it incorporate it into our Economic Protection Action Plan if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now, László, could I just, before I throw open the floor to our 3 business leaders, let me just ask you one brief information question. Would you say that what you've just described is very similar to what other countries are doing in this area, in the neighborhood, in the region, obviously, but more broadly? Or are there any points in which your plans diverge radically from them?
I think we responded immediately with the phase 1, but it was not as generous as in other countries, but it was eligible, I would say. It was enough to protect as many workplaces as possible. What I can see that probably we are spending less amount as a percentage of GDP on protecting the workplaces in this Kurzarbeitergeld concept, and we are spending more on the investment side. So if companies thinking ahead, and not only for these 2-3 months, but rather in midterm, 1, 2, 3, 4 years, we are focusing rather on that. And maybe we are ahead in this kind of thinking. I would say this can be a difference of the Hungarian crisis management compared to other countries in the region. Austria and Germany, mostly Austria, is far the most generous countries percentage of GDP in protecting workplaces. And I believe there's a difference that we had this planned economy experience just ended 30 years ago, and in the last 10 years we've been working a lot on creating a work and study economy and society. Maybe Western European countries doesn't have this kind of experience, and they don't have to fear that they fall back into something which they never been in. So we have to preserve our culture and our attitude towards market economy, and I think this is probably the difference of our plan compared to other countries around us.
Thank you very much. Now, let me turn, if I may, to the first of the business leaders, Dale Martin, President and CEO of Siemens. Dale, you've been a long-standing executive in Siemens, I think for about 35 years. You got a master's degree in social and economic studies from the University of Vienna, but you have traveled widely in Europe and the Far East. You also have a reputation as someone who has been very keen on encouraging vocational training and voluntary efforts by this community by the company to involve themselves with the community. You were also, of course, president for 3 terms of the German-Hungarian Chamber of Commerce, and you're still on that chapter on that board. So you obviously come to this with the strong credentials. Let me ask you, would you just like to begin by responding to what the minister said? And secondly, perhaps you'd tell us exactly how your company has found it in responding to the in a sense, the long pandemic crisis.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. Yes, thanks to the fact that I'm still with the German Chamber, I can witness how quickly and flexibly the government is trying to react, and also does react, also changes things quickly, because also the situation changes quickly. I must say that we as Siemens, and also as Siemens in Hungary, are quite fortunate that we don't belong to the hotel or tourism sector, but we do have a long-term, long-cycle business. So, for example, our two factories, which we have here actually in Budapest, we didn't have to change really very much. We are still on. We didn't stop. We didn't change shifts. We're in 3 shifts. We didn't have to change the number of staff. So we have no reductions, only some rescheduling, taking into considering that we had to increase distance, and also some changes because we have some very experienced colleagues who then rather stay at home because of the coronavirus. Also, our local profile here has a very high value-added manufacturing depth, and therefore we're not so dependent on a sophisticated supply chain, which in this case really does have its advantages. And in another field, we have 1,500 software engineers here who surprisingly did well working from home. And in the software industry, you have KPIs which your customer gives, and they seem to be doing well, certainly better than I had expected. And which is, of course, the new normal, that our sales activities have become now digital distant. But honestly speaking, having a digital environment is, for an international company, not so new, because due to the border crossing decisions, etc., we are used to communicating, cooperating, and working together, of course, virtually also in many ways for many years. The good news is that, as I mentioned, we're not laying off anyone in the whole Siemens Hungary group. Coming back to your question, we're presently not making use of any governmental support programs. So luckily, I don't have any personal experience in this. Naturally, the coronavirus hits all of us, also us. But considering others, I already mentioned, we're doing relatively well. And at the same time, there are opportunities in many fields, and our field is electrification, automation, and digitalization. And these fields are and will be required. So we see this as a challenge to shape the future, and the future is arriving more quickly due to the coronavirus as we expected.
Have you changed any of your survival and responses in the light of this? I mean, you've really been giving us quite a success story in the last few minutes. You were prepared and you've generally responded. And as you said, some of the challenges are worse for companies of a different kind. But have you decided not to do certain things in future, rather than change your plans in the event of something else like this occurring?
Well, I think one of the obvious outcomes of this is, yes, home office, but also strengthening distant learning. I think that learning is really a new opportunity in this sense, and I think we will have to put more emphasis on this, because it is actually, it has always been the challenge, but now I think it gives us the opportunity. And just as I said, that coronavirus speeds up things, and it is, I think, the right time to reconsider, to reevaluate, and to reposition yourself. And for this, you also have to prepare your workforce. And we're doing this internally, but also externally. We're also in our fields, which I just mentioned before, we're providing such kind of training courses. And those are going, those are becoming more digital now. They were somewhat digital, but only a small proportion. And now the overwhelming part will be digital.
Thank you very much. Let me turn now, if I may, to Zoltan Patai, Managing Director of NetPincér, which, by the way, I myself have been very struck since the regulations locking the city down came into being. I've been very struck by the competitive companies rushing all over the streets at a time when other traffic was disappeared, carrying food from restaurants, many of which, of course, didn't stay open at first, but have now reopened in order, because they can take advantage of the companies that are doing this. Now, Zoltan Patai is the managing director, and he holds a master's degree in strategy and international management from the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland. He's had roles in various technology companies and startups, and he was in McKinsey as well. So he has a wide range of business experience, also across Western Europe, Central Europe, and the US. And as I say, since the beginning of 2019, he's been the managing director of one of these companies that are keeping Budapest fed, and well fed, I may say. So could I just again throw open the question to you, Zoltan, about what it is, how you respond to the minister, and secondly, what in particular are the problems you've faced and overcome?
Yeah, thank you very much also for the invitation and the opportunity. I have to say that our sector was affected quite a lot with this coronavirus, and I have a dual feeling in that sense, because our partners, such as restaurants, were heavily and negatively affected, while on our end, for us as a e-commerce company, we had the opportunity then to help these businesses in this situation. What we also experienced, by the way, which is, I think, surprising to everyone, that we also faced some slowdown in the beginning when the outbreak happened. But what we did very quickly was to ensure the customers about safety that we can provide, and do several measures that put us back to the growth path that we had before. And yes, similarly to Mr. Dale, we were not laying off anyone in NetPincér, but actually we are hiring quite a lot of people at the moment, which is a good opportunity for various industries. And we have seen an influx of lots of applications. So I think what was key in our situation was the agility and the flexibility to react quickly to the situation. I was working quite hard with the team to prepare the company to be flexible. So we didn't know what will happen, but we did know that some economic shock or something may happen in the short term. So we were planning to be very agile on that, and fortunately we could do that. So that was, I think, first of all, the key thing to react to the coronavirus. And even though we haven't used any subsidies of the government, we did get advantage of several measures that they took that helped us being flexible. For instance, decreasing administrative tasks happened a lot. Restaurants could join us quickly without all the necessary administration that they would have otherwise had to do in normal times. Or we could also be more flexible with the workplace, thanks to the government offering us some more flexibility in that. Once we went back to, I would say, the growing path that we had before, we also thought that, okay, now let's then help our partners that are more affected in our industry. Because even though in the short term we may got back to the growth, of course, in the long term, if our partners get out of business, then this won't be good for anyone in the industry. So what we did, we came up with some action plan and measures for our restaurant partners, as well as for our rider partners, and so on, and so also for the more general community. What we did for the restaurant partners, first of all, we realized that we need to help with their liquidity. So many restaurants may run out of cash very quickly. So we decided to change from monthly to weekly payments and reconciliations with them so that they would have less trouble in liquidity. We also speeded up the onboarding process so that all the restaurants that haven't done delivery before, and this was a good opportunity for them to survive, could join us as quickly as possible. And lastly, we also even invested quite a lot of money to sponsor free deliveries in entire April so that they could get more orders. So we did quite a few actions to actually help them in the industry. And secondly, for the rider partners, besides safety, which was first, so in order to operate safely, we provided them sanitizers, masks, and so on. We also created them a program, some kind of financial aid, so that if anyone gets sick or gets out of the work, could apply for this financial aid provided by our company. So we also have them. And lastly, for the community, we also cooperated with the Red Cross in Hungary to donate to different healthcare organizations, as well as work together with several restaurant partners to bring actual meals to healthcare workers who otherwise were quite overworked and stressed in this situation. So yeah, to summarize, we did need to react quite quickly in the beginning. We needed to be flexible, and once we could stabilize our business, we turned to the other partners, our partners in the industry, to also help them.
Do you think that long term now, as a result of what you've been describing, that there is going to be, in effect, for many restaurants, their business is going to change in the future, and probably you will benefit from that in the sense that there's going to be people eating there as before, but also many of them will be eating out in, so to speak, as a result of the change, as a result of the new experience of this kind of life.
I think that once we get back to normal life, I don't think that the in-dining consumption will dramatically decrease. I think it could even get back to the previous state. But what I can expect is that the delivery share will increase. I mean that the entire pie will increase thanks to the fact that more and more people got to know that delivery can be affordable and a safe solution. So that's what I would expect. I mean, I think we are a good example where digitalization has happened already several years ago, but still the speed of the adoption could have been quicker, but for some reasons it wasn't as quick as many people expected. And with the coronavirus, that adoption speed basically increased. It's also, I think, healthcare, also education. So I can mention several industries where digitalization speeded up with the coronavirus.
Yes. Can I just also ask, would you like to comment at all on whether or not some of the initiatives that the Minister mentioned have been useful to you, or are there gaps that you think government might fill in its own tasks?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I think decreasing administrative burdens helped a lot to restaurants as well as us, and also making it easily available, or more easily available to be more flexible with the workplace in this situation also helped us a lot in these times. And where I see, I mean, I don't know if I should go into the details here or later, but yeah, I will have a few ideas where else the government could help. Yeah.
Well, maybe they'll emerge in the subsequent conversation. Thank you. May I now turn finally to Zsolt Markus, an entrepreneur, the founder, managing director, and majority shareholder of Veresi, Paradicsom, and Dymex Supply. You have you've been a serial entrepreneur, and your company is now a market leader in horticulture, with particularly in relation to tomato specialties. Could I just therefore begin by asking you two things, really? Again, would you like to comment on what the minister has said, or ask him any questions? And secondly, how has the virus in particular affected agricultural companies? I think you're also, for example, making hand sanitizers now, but I know looking at the news from, for example, England, my own country, and Scotland too, there's an enormous interest there, a demand actually, that among the first companies that should be able to reopen are the places where you go to buy plants. There's particular passion emerging in the English debate on this question. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say on all of those things.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to share our views. And yes, we actually have three companies, three different stories in our company group. One of them was the horticulture business, Veresi Paradicsom, where actually the virus impacted some level of commercial pressure. Is strange because we believe that due to the logistics, there is going to be less import vegetables in the market. But in fact, that didn't change too much. And because of the retailers couldn't sell as much as in the past, there was some kind of a drop on the sales. It's a little bit of on our end. I know in the general sector it's more. So there is a top line, a little bit of top line pressure. On the other hand, there's some negatives on the euro rate, inflation rate on key supply chain base, what we experienced. And the most critical part of it is the workforce isolation, because the biggest risk on this horticulture business on the virus is that we basically shut down the plant if we found the virus amongst our people. So basically we had to regroup the whole team, separated them, and completely work independent time frame and zone. So I would say on Veresi Paradicsom, the risk is basically operational related. So far we could manage the top line pressure. On PowerPack, which is a household cleaning and cosmetic material producer, the virus is caused some top line pressure. I would say 30% top line drop on the core products. But as you mentioned, we introduced a new product, this hand sanitizer, disinfection material. We shut down 2 of our cosmetic lines, and we started the operation of hand sanitizers. And that's a no-brainer. It was a real win in terms of the total volume. And Dymex Supply, which is a supply chain integrator, providing to the global customers from the States to Asia, supply chain and production support. That was the business which suffered the most, basically because of the international logistics are declined heavily. We had to shut down a lot of operation. And what we did, we transferred people from Dymex to PowerPack, and they are just helping this new production line to ramp up. So overall, we didn't have to fire anybody. And fortunately, we could keep up the normal business rhythm. And we follow the old Jack Welch school. We try to diverse the business and shared risk portfolio, because as you can see, one business is impacted at a moderate level, the other one is actually growing, and the third one is just basically stopped or at very, very limited speed it's going now. So that's about that's the full picture about the business itself. Now, if you ask me about the government initiatives and subsidies and programs, I would say so far we only took advantage of the credit suspension. The rest we didn't need to do, so we didn't take the resources from other companies. But the credit suspension was a great help, and it's really giving us a chance to keep our solid financial position because we believe there's going to be opportunities during this crisis to maybe do some acquisitions or do some opportunities. So we didn't want to waste our already collected cash, because at the end of the day, you know, the last you know, the 2009 was like 11 years ago. We expected some sort of decline in the economics, so we were not really in a bad financial shape at all. We were preparing for some kind of decline. So that's pretty much in brief on our story.
Thank you very much. Sorry, yes? Oh.
Yep, that's pretty much it from my side.
Yeah, no, thank you. I was going to ask you, because you are running 3 different companies, you're probably very well placed to tell us how you think the economy more broadly, and particularly the enterprise sector, is responding. Do you have the impression that the stories we've heard today are maybe typical of the response of industry at different levels, different sizes, or are there companies which, in your view, have shown themselves not to be entrepreneurial? I mean, how is the balance of enterprise versus sluggishness playing out more broadly, as far as you can see?
Look, I think we are at quite early stage of the of this whole situation. So to make conclusions, it's difficult right now. What I see so far, like I said, in different sectors, for example, on this household cleaning area, we see a second. Based on the order book, we see a kind of second ramp up on the disinfection material, which is forecasted in Q3, Q4. So, but this is just one segment, so I cannot really make conclusions at this stage. What we try to achieve is to get the most healthy from financial perspective, keep them up, and be very flexible. All of our 3 companies are SMEs, so not major companies. We are much more flexible than anybody else. So we are in the right position. Labor force, I think we are all set. So we just pay attention and get prepared for the next steps, or however is changing the economy and our markets.
Thank you. Now, let me now turn back to the László. Let me ask you to respond to what you've heard from 3 people in important positions, but in positions of a different kind in business. How would you respond to what they've said? Would you like to answer some of the points they raise? And then maybe address the general question of what role should the state play in kickstarting the economy when we know that people can go back to work again? What's a good balance in this economy between the state and the market?
So, John, you are asking me now because I didn't hear the first part.
Yes. Well, I was just asking you in general to respond to what the colleagues have said.
The reflections were very, very useful for me. If we are turning our attention towards how we want to open the economy again, or how we want to restart the economy, we have to keep in mind the contact protocols, the health contact protocols. We had some historic data on similar viruses. Well, hopefully this is not similar to Spanish flu, but in the time of Spanish flu, those cities in the United States which opened up too early and did not keep to contact protocols, they fall back and they lost more in their growth potential than those who were more cautious. That's why I thought, and it was Stephen Graham, so I was right with his first name, who said that cautious patience is much more important now than being recklessly courageous. And those cities in the United States which were more cautious reached a 3-4 times higher growth rate than those who opened too early. So we have to be cautious, and we have to build on the cautiousness and the disciplinedness of the Hungarian citizens. This is very important. The second very important thing is that Hungary is a relatively small and very open economy, one of the most open economies in the world economy, with export more than 80% as percentage of GDP. We are almost the most exposed export economy in the world. We built up in the last 10 years very flexible export capacities. The IMF is saying that the high-tech part of our industry is the second largest after Denmark and before Germany. So the high-tech sectors are the second largest here in Hungary compared to other countries around the world. So we are very much dependent on our export markets, and we have to be very cautious and very careful helping our export-oriented companies to start as soon as possible and have no disruption in their supply of liquidity and basic materials and labor, of course. So that all necessary means are there for their export, because that will pull the other parts of the economy as well. And third, thinking a little bit ahead, there was a scientific paper in Foreign Policy magazine around a month ago, and 12 international relations theory scholar was asked how did they think how the world will look like, the world politics and the world economy will look like after this crisis. And they were not economists, but at least 8, but rather 9 of them found it worth to mention to say that the value chains will shorten, which means that those countries which are close to the central countries with higher purchasing power will have an opportunity to grasp if these value chains will shorten. And we are preparing for that by being now cautious in order to have enough fuel if we have to fuel investments and create an environment for investors here in Hungary, and help such kind of companies like Zsolt's company, who said that the credit suspension helped them a lot. And they are living with this, although they are financially capable of paying the debts, the debt burden, but they still live with the credit suspension potential to keep solid financial situation. And because there will be opportunities and to utilize these opportunities, we want to be there for the companies here in Hungary to help them to utilize these opportunities.
Thank you. I've just seen a question that's come in, particularly addressed to Zoltan, and that is, how is the restaurant business, what are you hearing about how the restaurant business is doing outside of Budapest? Because it does, from your account, seem to be doing well there, but what about smaller cities?
Yeah, I mean, NetPincér is a national provider, so we are available in more than 800 towns and cities and villages. Even with our own logistics service, we are there in more than 35. So I mean, we have experience everywhere. What I can say is that the impact is very similar everywhere. So restaurants have been closed. They came to us to apply and start delivery with us. So I think the trends that we have seen were very similar. So that's why also the reactions that we chose were actually national. So we decided not only to have like in Budapest, but countrywide to all. So every measures that we took applied to all restaurants. What we will see now that from Monday on, like restaurant terraces can stay open in the countryside, we will see how this impacts the restaurant business, but the time is too short to tell so far.
As I was told by a Budapest restaurant the other day, well, they complained that as a result of this, that they feared that at weekends, Budapest people were going to disappear out of the city to eat in restaurants out of town, which would be an interesting test, a bit like the Berlin Wall in a way, when it fell down. Let me now ask all of the participants if they would like to respond to what the minister said, and to ask him any additional questions. So first of all, perhaps Dale. Oh. Maybe.
Just unmuting myself.
I see, sorry.
Honestly speaking, we're in quite close contact with State Secretary György László, or László György, depending on the language you're using, which is always confusing. But I think it is a real challenge for every country, and therefore also for Hungary, to determine what kind of major investments will be made, what kind of infrastructure will be influenced, because there are programs being envisaged to increase the long-term competitiveness. And I think, of course, Hungary is not the only country which is considering this, but if this can be done well and foundations can be laid for a good infrastructure, and Hungary has a very good position within Europe, geographically as well. I think that is very important, because it will define the next years, or as we saw with the New Deal, even decades of the future, and lay the foundation for this international competitiveness, and in turn, maybe, or not maybe, but definitely attract other companies who will be looking at, as György László said, shortening the supply chain, getting it closer, getting it within Europe, getting it within the European Union. And I think this is a big challenge, as others are competing for the very same. But Hungary has a good position.
So this would be a significant change to globalization, which in a sense saying is that business now begins at home and extends to the region more than previously was the case.
Yes, but of course the challenge is diversification, and changing the supply chain doesn't necessarily mean to have it in Europe, and definitely doesn't say it has to be in Hungary. It could also be include, if we now say maybe less China and having more Vietnam and Pakistan, could also be a way. And here is where the European countries have to show that they can be very attractive. So far, this has worked in many ways, and now the competition will be even more pronounced. But that's maybe even a better opportunity.
You're not a pessimist then about the end of about what happens after the health crisis ends. You're fundamentally optimistic that there may be changes, but there will be adjustments rather than dramatic changes. Is that fair?
Well, personally, yes, I am an optimist. This is part of my life and maybe also part of my job. But I don't think we're unrealistic. Yes, we have to change, but we certainly have to shape the future. And we have this, yes, unfortunate situation here, but we have to use this situation to make it better now and in the future.
Zsolt, can I turn to you and ask if there are any points you would like to make? I think we're probably moving towards the end of the discussion, so throw in whichever the points you want to draw from the entire discussion.
Yes, I would emphasize that what Dale is saying, the global supply chain is going to change, and the local to local concept is going to increase. That's we already started to see in the horticulture business, and that was coming purely from the quality of the product. But you know, the lessons learned from this crisis is if you have a supply problem on tubes or plastic basic things or gloves, that something is going really wrong. So I think if I were in the position of the government, I would I would just highlight certain base supply capabilities and try to insource it. You know, in a multinational environment, it's always a debate what you outsource and how you build your supply chain. And we had contingency plans, but that contingency plan doesn't work if you know, countries are saying that it's #1 priority to supply my domestic market, and you don't have your base supply in Hungary. I can give you an example. I was quite shocked that when we bought from China the spray caps, I'm not talking about alcohol, I'm talking about spray caps, and we had to airship it to satisfy the local demand, not export, local demand. Then the air transportation cost did go up to from $4 per kilo to $12 per kilo. And at the very end, when it had to be shipped, the price was doubled. So this environment, you cannot really build a contingency plan for, only if you have a local supply base and local manufacturing capability. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from this current situation, that how you determine what you need to have a local capability. And in the agriculture sector, it's quite common. Every country is saying, you know, I want to have my food supply, domestic food supply capability up and running no matter what. That's why it's loaded full of subsidization and a lot of support. But I think this might be needed to rethink, and certain things after COVID need to be localized in terms of production. And the most sad thing on this is, you know, I had to buy from China things like European Union, which is our generic market, and general supply capability was not able to do anything. And we had time to prepare, honestly, because the virus impacted not Europe first, but Asia first. So I think these are the things which we need to rethink and find out some solutions. And it's not only Hungary level, but I think it's European Union level. That's pretty much it, which I would add addition to the gentleman, what they said.
Thank you very much. Zoltan, what about the new normal from your standpoint? You've already responded to considerable change in the environment for your business. What about more broadly? Is there such a thing as the new normal that you're beginning to prepare for? And if you were starting other new businesses, what would they be?
Yeah, I think the new normal is that, as I mentioned, the digitalization and automation that has happened and has been speeded up, I think will stay with us. And I agree with the others and with Mr. Secretary of State that this is a good opportunity for us, for Hungary, to capture this situation and come out even stronger. Because coming out of McKinsey previously, we read the report for the Hungarian economy, which said that out of the 3 drivers of the GDP, Hungary was very good in terms of the share of people working, the number of hours worked, but we're a bit below the average for the productivity rate. And I think now if we have the chances as well as the subsidies to invest into automation and digitalization, that can help a lot to the Hungarian economy to get better out of this situation. One more thing that I would highlight, and I think will be key in getting back on track, is trust and the lack of fear for people. Because I think what is different from other crises at the moment is that it's not only minimizing the economic shock and reactivating the economy, but also to increase trust in people or decrease the fear, however you say it. Because we have seen it from other countries that even though there were no measures to block the country, or even though those measures have been lifted, people haven't started necessarily to change their behavior because there was still fear in them. So, I mean, I think it's crucial that the government helps here by, I think, doing well already with the transparent communication is good, but probably what could also help on top of that is increased testing, contact tracing, and support for companies as well in that, because that helps the society to increase trust, then they will get back to the normal consumption. Otherwise, even though everything can be lifted, they won't get back.
Well, thank you. I want to raise two broad questions for you all to answer, and then I think the Minister last, and then I think we move to the end of our discussion. The first is, we're appearing here on the free market. To what extent is the experience that you're having in this crisis a justification, in the sense of liberal ideas, neo-fascist sense, of the free market? I mean, it seems to me signs of people responding intelligently, creatively to an extremely difficult situation. And that's the first question. How do you feel that the experience of your businesses and of the minister's activities are, in a sense, demonstrate reason to believe the free market is responsive, capable with these questions at well? And secondly, I think the minister made plain, and I also made that they want to emerge slowly from the crisis. That you don't have to risk with people's lives, and therefore you have rules and regulations. But isn't it the case that there's signs of great reluctance in Britain, in the United States, in other countries, in Germany, to take very strict lockdown that exists in those countries? Let's say the lockdown here is less severe, actually, relied more on people's sense of responsibility than elsewhere.
I don't know how the others, I can't hear you.
We feel it's possible for us to sorry, I'm being distracted slightly. To do possible that the self-discipline of our population, which is real, is beginning to break down. How are we going to cope with that?
John, I couldn't hear it. Do you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Did I only have I'm the only one who had a very bad connection? Andres, you heard it?
No.
No, unfortunately, we couldn't hear well.
No.
Yes.
Unfortunately, not so good.
Yes, that's right. I see there's a complaint from a member of the public listening in. Can people hear now? Is that better?
Much better.
Okay. Well, I'll just rephrase what I said. There are two problems you all face. You as a minister, the other three gentlemen as business leaders. The first is, do we think that the self-discipline of the population is beginning to break down? In other words, are they wanting to ignore the rules more than they were? And if so, how can you cope with them? And finally, do you feel as a result of the experience of the last 2 months that the free market has turned out to be a fairly creativity and the ability to respond to very difficult circumstances in ways that actually prosperity and offer hope for the future?
John, I heard a little bit more. I understand something, but not, not exactly. There is something with the opening up and the health considerations and the cautiousness, and the other is with something with the free market, how it will affect the free market.
Well, yes, but I mean, it's not my question, which is as important as your answer. So I'm really giving you free rein.
Oh, okay. And you're turning to me now, or the colleagues?
Well, I think you now, and if anyone wants to step in afterwards, they can do so. If not, we can.
Okay. I think your question is just in line, or whoever's question is, congratulations to her or him, because it's very much in line what others said, and in the panel. and what I wanted to reflect on. Let's look at the forecast of the International Monetary Fund. And they said that the era of globalism is over, but it doesn't mean the end of globalization. Globalism was kind of a religion among economists and economic actors around the world, so businessmen around the world. And now we probably will get into a much more pragmatic era of globalization, and IMF says rather globalism, there will be coordinated globalization. We Hungarians are very much interested in keeping up the free markets, and if I understood Zsolt correctly, then we are very much interested in a common European market, and we want to keep this free market up, because if we believe in our competitiveness, then we have to strive for free markets in the European Union. But we also have to preserve, I'm intentional not saying protect, but preserve the values or the standards that we built up here in Europe. We have very strong work standards, consumer protection standards, environmental standards, which we never incorporated it into the taxes on the borders. So these are factors that are making European production and services more expensive, but these also belong to the quality of life here in the European Union, and we somehow have to preserve it. And if you want to preserve it, this crisis showed us a good example what is at stake and how difficult it is to preserve it in times of crisis. The other which I wanted to reflect is what Zoltán said was excellent, because today we are talking about we are living in an era where economists already confirmed that we humans are not rational in a way economists thought for at least 100 years. But we are human as well, and we are humans on the markets, and behavior economics, that is creating the new domain for economic thinking, the new economic thinking. And it is very important to keep the disciplinedness of the society in order to protect our health, because this is the foremost issue that we are having now. But it's also predominantly important to keep the trust in the economy, and keep the trust and the at least midterm but rather long-term strategic thinking of our entrepreneurs, because that will keep Hungary alive and competitive. And this is what we are balancing now, not to be too optimistic, not to be too responsible or reckless, to make the people understand not to be reckless, but in the same time, do not threaten the economic actors about the future. Because when you lost trust and fear appears, that will affect through the behavior of the economic actors our chances in the future. So this is the balance that we have to keep.
Gentlemen, unless there are any points that any of you wish to make in response to that, I think that's quite a good point on which to end. Are you happy with that, or would somebody else like to respond? No, I think you're all happy with it. Good. Thank you very much indeed. Minister, gentlemen, thank you so much. We're very grateful, and I think it's been fundamentally an optimistic broadcast, optimistic too about free market. All the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.